again, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting conversation. Why don't we start with, why don't you tell us how you first realized that you had psychic abilities?
I was like a lot of people. As a little kid, I could do some things. And when you're a child, you don't know that everyone can't do or see or sense what you can do or see or sense. Your norm is all you know. And so as a child of 4 or 5, I had a ghost for a friend. And I think this happens with a lot of parents. They assume their child has an imaginary friend. But my friend was named Sarah, and she wore ragged clothing, and she never changed her clothes. You know, big hint, that's a ghost. And my mother assumed she was an imaginary friend. She had dinners with us, and she played with me. And when we moved, Sarah didn't come with me, but my mother didn't notice that. And so there were little things. When I had a Siamese cat who was my best friend. Just, of course, everyone thinks their pet is the smartest animal ever. And when she died, her ghost kept coming to me, and I could see her standing there looking at me like, do something, do something. And I'm thinking, I'm 8 years old. I don't know what I can do for you, but I can see you. And so I kept telling my mother, and she'd go, there, you just missed your cat. But it's more than that. And I had a terrifying experience when I was about 5 or 6, and my parents left me alone in the house. And you have to remember, this is the 50s. I'm ancient, can't you tell? And when they left me alone, because in the 1950s, women didn't drive, and people didn't have more than one car. And they had to go grocery shopping. I was asleep. I was not feeling well. She thought I'd be fine. But at that moment, this being came into my bedroom. You have to remember, this was a very, very long time ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. So if I was hallucinating, if it was a dream, you're unlikely to remember things as clearly as this being was visible to me. And he was about 3 feet tall, and he had this collar and these long claw-like fingers. And I'm screaming and screaming, and I didn't know what to do with this. And finally, when my mother eventually walked in, I was in full hysterics. And she thought that, it was because I had a fever. And I said, no, this was real. When you're 5 years old and you describe that, there's no way your parent is going to believe you. As I got older, I realized I didn't know it had a name, but I could see. If my parents were lost, I could say, well, if you turn right here and left here, we'll get back where we need to be. They never questioned that. How could I know that? I'd never been there either. I didn't drive a car, so how could I know? And I don't know whether in the 50s people they didn't want to know, so they didn't ask any more questions. So my psychic ability kind of came and went until I was in college, and I was on a program that traded business and economics students around the world, and I had a traineeship in Medellin, Colombia. And I taught English to people who'd never heard English spoken. It was a fantastic experience. But they decided to take me deep into the Andes Mountains to this crazy place called El Peñol. And when I got there, it was raining, but it wasn't raining when we came back. And as we were coming down the mountains, and you have to understand, Medellin, Colombia sits at the bottom of a teacup. It's just surrounded by mountains all up and down. And I can see the city below. And everyone in the car is drunk except me and the boy I was dating. And I'm terrified. I feel like any minute we're going to go over the side, and no one will ever know what happened to us. We just vanished one day. And we were not abducted by aliens. And then I heard a voice say to me, you have to stop this Jeep because you're not supposed to die here. You have way too much to do this lifetime. Tell them to stop the car. And I did. I was pretty fluent in Spanish by then. I stopped the car. And we had a flat tire. So not only was the driver drunk, the Jeep had a flat tire. So the probability we were going to go over the side was a pretty high probability. My boyfriend took over, drove us back into Medellin safely, and we were fine. And I, of course, couldn't stop crying because the reality of how close we came was amazing. But my psychic ability did not go into hyperdrive until I married my husband. And then it's as if everything just exploded after that. And I could do more and more things. I didn't know they had names. I didn't know other people couldn't do them. And I began to feel the dead. And I began to sense things and be able to see things that were coming and have a really good track record. And then I realized that no, most people can't do what you can do. And you had better learn about this. There's no one to ask. You better study. So I've spent the last 50 years studying everything I can get my hands on, more than 50 years studying. You know, thousands of different books, very esoteric, books written at the turn of the century, books written in the 1800s during the Spiritist movement when they actually talked about these things. Because it wasn't enough for me to say, oh, Spirit is talking to me. I'm a retired naval officer. I really wanted to understand the physics behind what I could see and do. So I was learning the physics of metaphysics. And once I began to do that, once I began to look for God's hand in how everything worked, because you take this breath and you realize God is the first mathematician, because look at the geometries of every living thing on earth. The first geologist, the first botanist. And when you start going back and you begin to marry the divine with the science in front of you that you know is true, then you now step up to a different plate of understanding. Because if you just say, oh, Spirit told me, pretty much you can get yourself into trouble every time. But if you learn one of the things they talk about in law, because I study spiritual law, military law, civil law, and business law because of a variety of reasons. But under the law, certain laws always apply. And if you follow spiritual law, then you can walk that fine line. But you have to learn what the laws are. And a lot of these laws were actually written down in the time of Atlantis. And there are writers today, Frank Alper being one of my favorite authors for discussing spiritual law, begins to help you understand the laws of what you didn't, but you didn't know you knew, like as above, so below. So what is happening outwardly is also happening inwardly. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That is the law of karma. And when you start studying that, that's a law of physics. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. That is a basic law of thermodynamics. Well, that would explain a ghost. So when you start applying physics, not just Newtonian, but quantum physics, and now there's more physics we can't even imagine and wrap our brain around coming, or is already here. Now you begin to understand remote viewing, string theory, quantum entanglement. And as I continue, I'm studying to this day, how do these things work? When you start putting them together, again, like a lot of astrophysicists, you begin to see the hand of the divine in everything. I know that's a long explanation, but perhaps it gives you a little bit of an insight into where I am coming from when it comes to understanding this kind of what we call psychic ability.
That's all fascinating. Gosh, I've got so many questions running through my mind right now.
Go ahead.
I also find it fascinating. You just said quantum entanglement. Just as an aside, because I'm an author, and my latest novel, one of the characters is schizophrenic, and she sees things. But in the book, I make it kind of clear that maybe what she's saying is real, and she's just saying something different. And anyway, I use the concept of quantum entanglement to describe she uses, the character uses the term quantum entanglement to describe how she is, seeing these other people that no one else sees. But anyway, that's just a that's just an aside, I guess. But I do find it fascinating that you're talking about real physics and applying it to spiritual things. First off, what does the phrase spiritual law mean? I've never heard those two words put together. Spiritual law.
Everything is spiritual law. You've heard of remote viewing, I'm sure.
I don't know what remote viewing is. I think I've heard the words, but I don't.
Okay, well, let's take remote viewing as an example. Remote viewing is also, the other term for it is psychic vision. And it's the old Russian, Soviet KGB, the CIA has used remote viewing. And it's where a psychic is in one location, and you can give them coordinates, which is really hard. But you can give them a visual and ask them to project their consciousness to another location to determine what's really there. Excuse me. So when you do that, there are a lot of laws that apply to remote viewing. I discovered by accident I could remote view. It's not like I went to a school and studied it, not like I wanted that skill set. But if someone says to me, can you clear my house? And they're in Wisconsin, which has happened, I'm not going to fly to Wisconsin and walk through the door and psychically say, oh, I think I feel. I'm going to set a date and time and go into a bedroom and project my consciousness. But before I do that, in accordance with spiritual law, I must make sure I have the owner's permission, she and her husband. Because the energy I'm projecting can be felt by both partners. If you were to harm the other partner, either you surprise them or you upset them in some way, now you have harmed the person. One of the first spiritual laws is do no harm with whatever your ability is. You must ask permission. You cannot just ask spirit and think you're okay. Spirit, if you've ever noticed with psychics, never says no. Spirit always says yes. It doesn't work that way. And you don't really know who spirit is anyway. It can be in any one of 1,000 different things or beings. So you have to ask permission. If you don't, let's say I had a guy say, listen, my neighbor owes me money. I want you to remote view his brain and manipulate him into paying me back. And I was so astonished at this request. I said, well, one, it's a gross violation of spiritual law. It's like breaking and entering into someone's home and their body and their mind. Would you want someone to do that who had no moral scruples, who didn't know that spiritual law says that if you do that, you earn horrendous karma? A person didn't give you their permission to do that. You would not want to believe that somebody who had an ability at that level would go into someone's house, body, and mind without that person's permission. And no, again, you can't just ask spirit. And I had somebody else ask me to do something similar, and then each time I had to explain those specific parameters. Sounds like you have a question.
Where did these laws come from? Who wrote them down? Who made them up? Where did you find them?
Some of them I just knew. Some of them are basic laws of physics. And again, they were written down in Lemurian times. And then they were also written down again in Atlantis the first and the second time. And many of the descendants of the old Atlanteans have written them down for modern times. And one of the best authors is Frank Alper. And I know that his books are available on Amazon, and people have asked me. Alper is his name. And I think the book is Universal Law. And when you obey the law, it keeps you in a karmically correct place. Because if you develop greater and greater levels of psychic ability or layers of psychic ability. Let's say that you're a medical intuitive and you can see, oh, this person has an illness, but you have the ability to go into that person's body and heal that. And you can see if there's a ghost with that person. So you have identified 4 abilities. You can see the illness, you can heal the illness, you can remote view it, and you can see if there's a ghost. Okay, every one of those abilities carries with it a heavy dose of karma. So just because you can see something going on with someone doesn't mean you are authorized to just blurt it out. You have to be extremely careful how you handle the ability you have. That's why I studied. I didn't wake up and become all knowledgeable. I mean, we all have a first day, a first understanding. And when you're able to use I use remote viewing every single day. I mean, there's just not a day I don't use it. But I have to follow the law no matter what. If I want to clear my house, I can only clear my house to my property line. I can clear the street because I pay dues to maintain the street. And I can clear a public thoroughfare because I pay taxes on the thoroughfare. But I can't touch anyone else's home. That is spiritual law. It's trespassing. It's spiritual trespassing.
What does it mean to clear something?
Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
I worked with many real estate agents. And I lived in San Diego for 32 years. I met a lot of real estate agents who were friends of mine. And for instance, I'm in Washington State now, but the people who sold our house called me a couple of months after we left and said, we had a house in this neighborhood, and it's a nice house, but there's satanic stuff, and we've cleaned the walls and painted it and done the landscaping, and the house still feels horrible. Here's some photographs of it. Can you clear it? Would you do that for us? So I said, sure. So what that means is I have the parameters, I have the coordinates and the visual, and I project consciousness to the house, and I look at it somewhat in the physical, and then I look at it in basically the etheric level, and look at the damage that the satanic rituals and the drug use did to the house. One, it lowered the frequency, and that much dark energy opened up a portal underneath the house. So that had to be closed, which is a little bit of a sophisticated skill. And make sure it doesn't reopen, and then heal the land. It takes a couple hours, so it's tiring. And then I go back for a couple of days and check it. And then I called them and said, these are all the different things that I found, and they were doing this and this and this in the house. And the house sold in 5 days flat, whereas before nobody would look at it.
Wow. Now, let's say you hadn't cleared the house.
What would happen?
What would happen if somebody moved in?
This happened in a house in Colorado. It was a write-up about it. The real estate agent, apparently the law in Colorado doesn't require you to tell the new owner if someone died in the house. It's a law in California, and South Carolina has a law that if your house is haunted, you have to tell the buyer. Apparently Colorado didn't have that law. So this couple moved in. They didn't realize that a serial killer had previously owned the house and murdered his victims in their living room.
Oh, God.
Exactly. They kept hearing moaning at night. They'd hear people screaming. They'd hear people crying. No one could sleep at night. They were going to sue everybody, but how do you prove what you're seeing and feeling? If you can get a psychic in there, I mean, I could have cleared that house and no problem with some very simple steps. I could have given them some tools to help them clear that house, although closing the portal would have been a little iffy. But it's the Amityville horror. It's really what this would become. You wouldn't be able to sleep. Your finances would tank. You'd have water leaks like you can't believe. Every mechanical thing in your house would start to break, costing you and costing you and costing you money. You and your spouse would fight. You'd fight with your children. You'd fight with your neighbors. You wouldn't recognize your personality anymore because the darkness was invading your very soul, moving through you. You don't know who you are anymore. That's what would have happened.
Golly. So when you clear the house, are you locating ghosts and sending them to where they're supposed to be?
Absolutely. There are not just ghosts there. You have lower realm intelligences. You have ghosts. You have souls who are trapped. And I cross everybody and everything over. And I wrote a book on that. It's called the Crossing Over Prayerbook. So you don't have to have a medium. I always hold this funny. Here we go. You don't have to have a medium to cross over a loved one, or if you just bought a house and you think it's haunted, you should be able to do it yourself. Because it's a whole lot cheaper than paying a medium. And the medium can't guarantee you that you've crossed the person over, but absolutely you crossed them over.
What is a lower realm intelligence?
I'm hoping that your listening audience has seen the movie Ghost. It was a low-budget film, made a ton of money with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore, Whoopi Goldberg, Tony Goldwyn. And in this film, you know, Sam is murdered. And he doesn't realize he's dead, and he starts running after the guy who killed him. He looks back and he sees his body. This film is one of the most accurate portrayals of what happens after death in various scenarios. So when Sam dies, he sees the light come for him. And that's what happens when you die. You see the light. For the majority of people. But the murderer dies, and then the Tony Goldwyn character, who was the stockbroker, dies. They both either committed murder or attempted murder. When that happens and they died, then these little guys, they're totally inky black with long claw-like fingers and red eyes, and they're about 3 feet tall. They're called lower realm, REALM, intelligences, and they inhabit horrific places where horrible things have happened. And they torment the living, and they absolutely torment the dead. And when I find them, and I've found them thousands of times, I cross them over too. I don't leave anybody there. You don't litter the ether. Whatever you find, depending on your skill level, you are required to do something with every single being, and it has to be karmically correct.
You mentioned a 3 foot tall clawed creature that you saw when you were a child when you had a fever. Was that a lower realm intelligence?
No, it wasn't. It was something completely different. And I've met several other people, 4 other people who've seen it. And they're so thrilled that they aren't the only ones who've ever seen it. It was a being from the lower astral, but I don't know what particular realm in the lower astral it was from.
And what was it doing? What purpose was it, or for what purpose was it in your room?
My theory, because it's not like someone sat me down and said, that's why you saw this guy. My theory was that it was to scare me enough that I would not develop psychic ability. And if that had happened, a lot of things, an awful lot of people who have received help would not have received that help. So I think it was to scare me. And, when you're 5 years old, you're scared. But after a while, you have to wake up and decide you're just not going to be scared of this stuff anymore. You got to put your big girl panties on and get on with your day and ask for help from the divine and move forward and take care of it.
Did your parents eventually come to believe you that you had psychic abilities? And you mentioned that they took directions from you when they were driving.
My father never quite understood. I baffled him, and he never talked about it. My mother couldn't wrap her brain around it, and she pretended it wasn't real.
Yeah, that was kind of the way of that generation, wasn't it?
You grew up in the 30s and 40s, and your kids in your boomer kids in the 50s, you can't wrap your brain around what's a psychic. Those are the people, with the the hand and the eye thing, and they have crystal balls, and they do all this crazy stuff. Can't be real. It's all fake.
Right. How does excuse me. Let's talk about ghosts. How would somebody recognize having a ghost in their house?
The first thing that hits you is you keep seeing something out of the corner of your eye. It's like it goes by, and you look for it, and you think, God, am I losing my mind? I must be imagining things. You hear something. It's like you hear this little chatter, but you can't quite make it out. You get up in the middle of the night thinking there's somebody in your house, but there's nobody there. You have water problems. Your toilet leaks, or your sink leaks, or your water pump in your car leaks, or you name it, it leaks. You start to fight with each other. Depending on how the ghost died, you'll have a variety of different kinds of problems. And your house is always a little bit extra dusty because they're in the fourth dimension, and they leave what is called psychic soot. I know very few people talk about this, but if you have a ghost in your house and or lower realms, your house never feels clean, and you feel like you're losing your mind. You're not crazy. You have a ghost. Cross the ghost over, clean your house, you'll be fine. Don't attach a lot of drama to it. Just get on with business.
Why water? You mentioned water leaks not only in the house but also in your car. What's their connection to water?
Water always represents the subconscious. Example, if you have constant dreams about toilets, especially very dirty toilets, then it's as if your subconscious is saying something terrible happened to you, and it's really dirty, and we've got to flush it away. Help me, help me, help me. If you have dreams about you're on ice and the ice is melting, you're coming into an awareness. You're waking up from something. You're beginning to feel better. If you have clean water leaks, like leaks in your kitchen, it's your subconscious saying, dude, there's somebody here. You got to fix it. We're trying to get your attention. Wake up and smell the coffee or the leaking water.
So does your own conscious then affect the water when it knows there's a ghost? Is that what you're saying?
Part of it is the ghost, and part of it is you. It's a complicated arrangement, and I hear this frequently. People say, well, I have a ghost, like it's a badge of honor, and I love my ghost. My ghost looks out for me. It's my dead husband, or the ghost came to the house, or, I don't want to hurt them by crossing them over. Why would going into the heaven world be hurtful? But if you don't understand that, of course you might think that. It's not a criticism. It's that, okay, this is my norm, but it's not everyone else's norm. It's new information. It's what? All these leaks I'm having, I could have a ghost. I wrote a series of ghost books, Ghost Stories from the Ghost Point of View, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And there's 63 different stories among the books. In one of the stories, there was a house. It's on Mount Helix in San Diego, in La Mesa area. It's on top of a mountain, and it's in the shadow of the Mount Helix cross. It's a beautiful place to live. That house was the house from hell. Everything that could leak, leaked. Brand new car, everything broke down on the car. The mechanic gave up, didn't want to see the car come back in. The gardener quit. The maids quit. The hoses leaked. Their businesses went in the toilet. I mean, it was on. There was so much that had happened in that house that no one died there. And they apparently had a lot of different psychics try to clear the house. And one psychic wanted to charge them, wanted them to buy 5 candles for the tune of $5,000. Now you know you have a charlatan. And I said, I don't know. She said, has there ever been a house you couldn't clear? And I said, well, not so far. If I can't clear it, I'll tell you. I'm not going to charge you if I can't clear it. And I did. I did clear it. And it wasn't that the homeowners had done anything wrong specifically, or there was a murder, or there was a ghost. There was a ghost that would come and go because she lived next door. She and her daughter and granddaughter were all practicing black magicians, and they would take their energy from whoever owned that house. It was a $2.3 million house. It was incredibly expensive, during the time. It was about 15 years ago. And they tried to sell it. They couldn't give the house away. They found satanic things in the backyard. And their backyard was on a massive slope, which drains energy from a house. That's just physics 101. So a lot of things were done. It's not, in that case, it was not going to be enough to clear that house. And I did clear the house, and I did remove the magician and the ghost of the magician. And we feng shuied the house, which massively shifted the energy. And their house finally began to feel like a home. But all of that said, the couple had some marital problems. They eventually divorced, but they had to get the house out of the way before they could begin to deal with their own problems. I mean, I knew this woman was in trouble when she woke up in the middle of the night and there was a butcher knife, right at her feet. She was terrified, absolutely terrified. And somebody who knew somebody gave her my name. And we cleared the house. They did eventually sell it.
How does somebody become a ghost?
We're all going to become ghosts. It's not like you pick a train line and say, oh, this one goes to heaven and this one, you're going to be a ghost. We live in the third dimension. It's a dimension of time and space and gravity. Without gravity that holds you in place, that anchors you, gravity allows you the feeling of time and the feeling of space so that you can move through your days. So in a mortal body, you can experience life. When the body dies, when the physical structure is no longer viable, we immediately separate body and soul. You ever notice that? Oh, the soul's gone to heaven. We're going to bury the body. You notice you never bury a soul? Never. No one ever says that. And they know that deep inside of them, but they don't quite put the pieces together. That's kind of my thing, why do we always say that? So as soon as you leave the body, you have something called the silver cord. And that's what connects your subconscious, your ecashic records, to the mortal frame. And once that's cut, then we say that the body dies. And the soul exits the body and reverts to its original form. This is a temporary structure. Reverts to its original form, and it takes with it the ecashic records, which are the records of every experience you've ever had, every person you've ever met, every place you've ever been, everything you ever touched. That's what you take with you at death, and the amount of love that you have given and received. And you move from the third dimension to the fourth. Well, the fourth dimension is like a step-up transformer. Going from the third to the fifth is a little tough. You have to have this intermediary phase, which is a fourth dimension. It's the land of ghosts. Now, you die, you see the light, and you go, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to experience the light. And you go over and you move into the light. Your time as a ghost might be minimal, fractions of a second, except there's no time in that dimension. But let's say that you were taught all your life that you were born in sin and you died in sin. And you'd think God couldn't ever love you because that's what your pastor told you were born in sin and died in sin. And the light comes for you and it's warm and welcoming. And you go, well, wait a minute. I can't go because I was born in sin and I died in sin. So again, I know God can't love me. Except that you come here for experiences. You're not perfect. Let's say that you'd left your child in a hot car. Your child died. You have so much guilt with you. You don't think God could ever love you. You you hit somebody while you were driving and you caused a death. You don't think anyone could ever love you. You committed suicide. Oh my God, God can't love me. If there's only one message your listeners take from the show, it is that I don't care who you are or what you've done, God will love you. If you are a murderer, a serial killer, in my Father's house are many mansions, cross over. You don't want to keep reincarnating as a serial killer. So you become a ghost for either a very long time or a very short time based on your belief system. Because in that dimension, you still have free will. That's what a lot of people don't quite understand. I hear people say, I hear a lot of psychics say this, they had unfinished business. Really? Not sometimes. I mean, I had a mother decide she was going to control her daughter till her daughter died, and then control her as a ghost. And I said, I think we're not going to have you do that. We're going to cross you over. And she said, I can't. You can't do that. And I said, well, yeah, I can. My presence trumps yours. So you are going to cross over and you're going to leave your daughter alone to live her life. And don't you see your grandmother over there and your aunt? All those people are ready to welcome you. You don't want to walk away from that. And she said, oh my gosh, I miss them so much. And she was gone just like that. It was really kind of,
wow.
It was kind of cool. It doesn't matter what you think your life was. You were an alcoholic. You were a drug addict. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what faith you thought you believed in or you didn't believe in, or you were an agnostic or an atheist. Newsflash, when you are dead, none of that matters. When that light comes for you, walk over to it. Feel it. Embrace it. At the end of the movie Ghost, Patrick Swayze describes what he sees. And again, it's the most beautiful, accurate description. Oh my gosh, you can't believe the love. You can't believe how much love there is. Oh my gosh, I can feel it. I can feel it, he says. I don't know the exact quote, but having watched this thousands of times, watched children who were murdered, feel the light, feel the hand of an angel in theirs, and all the trauma they suffered slips away, and they feel the love and the safety and the healing that angel gives them in that moment. And then they cross over and they are returned to that whole perfect and complete self. And once you cross over, this amazing thing happens. You get to sit down with counselors of divine wisdom, and they will help you go over the life you just lived. Wouldn't you like some answers to why was your father so cruel? Why did your mother die when you were 6? Why did your sister die? Why were you in that accident? Why were you a paraplegic? Why? They can help you to understand not just the life just lived, but the connection to all the previous lives you have lived. So crossing over is enormously important, and that's why, again, I'm kind of pushing this. The Crossing Over Prayerbook has prayers for crossing over children who have died, no matter the method of death, murderers, people who were murdered, suicide, drug, alcohol, abortion, miscarriage, children, mass casualties. There are prayers in this book specifically designed to assist almost every death event you can imagine. It's the most unusual book. I have people all over the world using this book. That's a little bit about what happens when you're a ghost.
That's very good. That's a very good answer. I'm curious, you mentioned crossing over. You help people cross over. You help souls cross over to the heaven realm. Is there a hell?
That's the fourth dimension. And the fourth dimension, you know how we say, you've heard the term, in my Father's house are many mansions. And what that means is there are many levels to the heaven world. And where you go in the heaven world is based on your frequency at death and the karma you carry with you when you cross over. If you don't cross over, in the fourth dimension, another term for it is the lower astral. And there are dimensions and layers and layers and layers of the lower astral based on your karma and your frequency at death. And so if you don't cross over, if you are a practicing black magician and you've caused great harm to others, or you're interested in mass murder, and you do things that deliberately harm people, deliberately harm them, then there are various dimensions that you go, and now you have someone who is your master, and you have to obey them. It is horrific, horrific existence. And you might say, well, why don't they deserve it? I would offer you that they reincarnate from that and do it again and again and again. But if you cross over that horrible, horrible person into the heaven world without prejudice, without judgment, maybe in the next life they won't kill someone. Think about that.
That sounds like a very high level of forgiveness.
Well, it's not up to me to forgive them. It's up to me to be of spiritual service without judgment or prejudice. It's not up to me to forgive them or not forgive them. That's not my job. My job is very clear. It is to assist every soul, living, dying, or dead, with the possibility of the delight, the healing that is in the divine.
Can you describe your experience when you're crossing someone over? Like, how does it start? Are you sitting down in a dark room meditating? I mean, what do you see? What do you feel? Who are you talking to? Can you describe what's going through? What your experience is.
I'm pretty fast at it by now. So when I first started, I didn't understand how to streamline the process. And my process is probably as unique as everyone else's who actually does this. There are not that many of us who cross people over. It's as simple as this. If I am in a mall, or wherever I happen to be, and I see a ghost, I don't even have to close my eyes anymore. I can just request that an angel, they're called angels of transition, immediately come and assist that soul right now and cross them into the heaven world right now. It's that fast. Anyone can do that.
Have you developed like a rapport with these angels? I mean, apparently you have.
I have a team that I'm just somebody's field agent. I mean, that's probably the most, simple way to explain it. I'm just somebody's field agent. You kind of need a helpful person, and I must have volunteered, and so I have a sizable team that helps me with a variety of situations, and I have the ability to call on resources that assist me in very difficult situations.
Mm-hmm. Earlier, you were telling a story about a mother who wanted to stick around to, boss her daughter around, a mother who was dead, and you were talking to her. What is that like? What's your experience there? Do you physically see somebody in front of you, or is it taking place inside your mind?
Those are really good questions. In this case, I was given her address, again, the coordinates, and she was in Virginia, I think, and I was in San Diego, and I just, projected my consciousness to this woman's house, and I looked through. She was pretty sure it was her mother. I said, well, I don't know. Maybe it's somebody else, or maybe there's several. I don't know. So I can't say, oh, she told me X and it will be this. I have to have an absolutely open mind as to what or who could be there. And I remote view all of the rooms. And I do it at night because energy is calmer at night. You ask a pilot. If you're flying at night, you have less turbulence than if you fly during the day. So, and there she was in her bedroom, and she harassed her daughter all night long so her daughter could never get a night's sleep. And every time the daughter went to call me, she would tell her to put the phone down. I mean, she harassed her daughter for 10 years, and her daughter had my card for a year. So I get there and I see her. I can't think of her name. Minnie, I think it was, like Mildred. It was an M name. And I said, so I see that you're here with your daughter. And she says, yes, she's so stupid. She needs me to take care of her and run everything for her. I control her. And I said, your daughter's 55 years old. Don't you think it's her turn to live her life without you? Oh, no. I'm going to be with her till the day she dies. And I said, well, and yes, I can see her. She's wearing what she died in. She doesn't change clothes, which is very accurate in the sixth sense. And she says, well, I have my say-so, and I'm telling you that I am not going anywhere. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to harass my daughter as much as I want and control her, make sure she never has a friend or a relationship. She never gets to sleep because I'm in charge. I mean, she's a really wicked woman. And was a, bless her heart.
So you can see her.
I can see her. I can see
I'm just curious, but do you see her in your mind, or do you see her physically in the room with you? Or are you seeing the room in the woman's house? Your remote viewing?
I am
seeing a different room.
I am projecting my consciousness to that woman's house, and I'm in her bedroom. I had to look in all the rooms of her house to find her mother.
Okay.
And then I found her mother standing over the bed.
And you mentioned earlier, you said my presence trumps yours. Is that a fact, or were you just trying to convince her to get out?
No, that's a fact.
And how did that come about?
I didn't understand that for a long time. It's as if once I was there, they had no choice. They had to leave. It didn't matter who they were, what kind of a magician they were, or devil thing, or whatever it was. Once I was there, I don't know whether it was because I came with such a heavy-duty team, but I realized very early it wasn't necessary to be heavy-handed. It just simply isn't. I'm not in a physical body when they see me. They see a presence. And they called me the light lady because I look like this light being, and I didn't know that until one woman woke up and saw me standing in her room. And she was so fascinated. She couldn't believe it. And I said, well, you're the only person in all these years that's ever been able to say that you saw me. But the ghost called me a living person saw me. Yeah. And the dead call me the light lady because I bring them to the light. I look like light to them, and I bring an angel of light to hold their hand. I can bring in a child angel. I can bring in a 7-foot archangel, a regular angel, and I look at the situation and determine what does this person need. Sometimes a child needs a large angel. Sometimes an adult needs a child angel. Especially if I had a ghost who was a divorce attorney who is now a ghost. She died of breast cancer. And she believed she needed to go to hell and be punished because she was a divorce attorney.
Oh.
And a friend of mine called and said, my divorce attorney's haunting me. You have to do something.
Oh, gosh.
This was a really good woman. But she felt personally responsible for the breakup of all those families. And I said, how could you possibly be personally responsible? I mean, that's in one of that story's in the first ghost book, I think. A very poignant story. This is a very good woman who helped an awful lot of women have alimony, have the ability to care for their children and stop an abusive situation. She didn't see it that way. She left a husband and 2 teenage girls. It's horrible. And she wanted my friend to understand that I did this. I just couldn't live anymore. Almost like she willed herself to die. Breast cancer is in the heart chakra area. Men have heart attacks. A lot of times women have breast cancer. for this deep and abiding sadness that seems to really consume them. And I could see this woman. She was in a hospital. She looked like she had, was wearing what she wore when she died, which was just hospital clothing. But her poignancy, her deep and abiding sorrow almost broke my heart. And I brought in an angel, and she said, oh no, God will not love me. Oh no, you take that angel away. And I thought, okay, I'm listening. What is needed for this woman? This woman is so tortured. So I brought in what looked like a 5-year-old angel. She just walked over and she slipped her hand into the ghost's hand. And she softened immediately. And I opened up a doorway so she could see and begin to feel that light. It's like it begins to interpenetrate and intermingle with your soul. And she said, do you think God could love me? And I said, well, I have it on very good authority that God could very much love you. You didn't deliberately harm anyone. It wasn't your fault that their marriages broke up. It's time to cross over and feel this light. And then she was gone. Now there's a byproduct benefit of crossing over someone who has died. Whether it's someone you have loved or someone you didn't, especially if you're grieving someone, suicide or murder or whatever there's a million ways people die. It mitigates your grief to a large degree, because what you're not realizing is that the dead grieve. They grieve the life they lived, the mistakes they made, the people they may have hurt, the people they disappointed. They died too early. Some of them don't know they're dead. That's a whole other discussion. But when they know they're dead, they're so tortured that when you offer them the light of the divine, Paul, let me assure you, this is the compassion every person on earth will want for themselves. Not because I say so, irrelevant, but because the compassion of the light is the message that everyone on earth needs to feel. It is the love. If you live in the light, well, that's awesome. But most of us live in a kind of, a difficult day to day. Say things maybe we wish we hadn't said, or grumpy today, or snapped. You're still loved. You're still adored. Still that light waiting for you, no matter who you are or what you've done. I've crossed over pastors, crossed over suicides who are always sorry. When you find a way to help them feel that light, maybe in the next life, they won't take their own life. I had a mom in North Dakota cross her own son over using the Crossing Over Prayer, the compassion prayer for suicide, crosses over your son. She said, would you do it? And I said, I can do it. But if you do it, it's your last act as his parent. It's the last compassionate act you can do. And she did it. And it was life-changing because it changed her grief. It didn't stop her grief. It gave her hope in her grief. And then she asked me to write a prayer that she could say every night and still send him her loving energy. You'll see in the Crossing Over Prayerbook a special prayer for after you've crossed someone over and they've taken their life, where you feel you are still sending them your love. And she said it so dramatically mitigated the pain of her grief that she shares this with other parents who have had to live through what she has lived through. That's how work like this echoes forward. It's not enough to just say, oh, I see ghosts and I can cross them over. So what are you doing to help on a much larger level? I guess that's what I'm really here for.
Gosh, these are all such uplifting stories. I love hearing all this. I love interviewing people on this show because I never really know what's coming, and this has been fascinating, and I've got a really good positive feeling in my chest right now listening to all your stories. I'm wondering, But I'm wondering what you think we should be doing on Earth. What is our purpose? What's the most important thing for us to be doing or accomplishing in this life before we die?
A great master once said, Dr. George King, said, "We are here for service. We're here for the service of others." Your service is, frankly, allowing me to put this information out there, and for that I'm truly grateful. We are here to learn to love one another. Yes, people make us angry. We are outraged at things that happen. If you can find a way to love every day, to remember to love the person in front of you. I've been married to the same guy for 50 years. You believe that? You know how hard it is to be married to a psychic? Especially a left-brain engineer. And he went to run errands today. I made sure I gave him a hug and a kiss. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have a man like that to love. If you have loving people in your life, tell them you love them. Be grateful that they're in your life. Enjoy your friends. Love is the answer to what's happening on earth today. We just feel awkward about it sometimes. We feel that to pray we have to be in buildings of wood and stone. You can pray anywhere you want. You can pray in traffic that, people will be calm. You can send an energy of peace and calming out to an irritable traffic situation. You can start using the energy of prayer. Again, there's a physics that goes with prayer. All thought is energy. The thought that you're thinking, that you're sending out an energy wave. That's a whole other discussion. When you start studying the dynamics of love, you start breathing it in, not in some weird metaphysical way, or sitting cross-legged on the floor in a meditation hoping something magic will happen to you. That's all great. But when you're making supper for your family, be grateful you have a family to make supper for. When you're listening to a friend who's having a bad day, be grateful you have a friend to listen to. Again, love and gratitude and patience and kindness are what we need right now. And we also have to stand up for doing the right thing, even when it's very hard. So, are those panaceas? Of course not. Are they the only answer? You can change the world if the world that you change is yours by the love that you give and send out and the peace that you can find within yourself. And one of the easiest ways to establish that is a deep and abiding connection with God, with the divine, with Christ, with the energies of the universe that are love. When you do that, it helps the entire planet, because the planet feels the energy of the 6.5 billion people who are on the planet right now. Yes, that number has gone down a lot. So when you feel that, you are helping in the best way you can. It doesn't have to be some big dynamic task. It's just love in the moment you're in to the best of your ability.
Wow, that's a great message, and I think that's a great message to end on. Do you have any other points you want to make, or statements, or things you want to say before we go?
Yes, you can find out a little bit more about me on ghosthelpers.com, and all my books are listed there, including the Crossing Over Prayerbook, and those links take you right to Amazon. And a lot of these are audiobooks. I would offer that when you think about ghosts, think about them with compassion, not fear, and assistance, not revulsion. Give them the compassion you will want for yourself, even if you're afraid in the moment, because you can't necessarily see them, but you can feel them. I once had all these little kids hanging on me. And when I brought in angels for all of them and crossed them all over, that feeling stopped. And I heard these little thank yous, thank yous, thank yous. When you change how you look at things, it's like cogs in a wheel. All the other things around you begin to change. and you can be improved and improve those around you. So I want to thank you for having me so much.
Thank you for coming on, and I'll put a link on the podcast show notes page at paultrammell.com. Again, your website is ghosthelpers.com.
Correct.
Tina Erwin, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's been enlightening.
Thank you for having me.